there too. Also, an important thing to remember, the pathologist at Parkland,
Rose?
Earl Rose, who objected so strongly to the body being taken, he was overruled, but it doesn't matter because he was actually a member of the HSCA's forensic pathology panel when the HSCA reinvestigated the case back in the 1970s. Mm-hmm. As part of that pathology panel, he agreed with the conclusion of the Bethesda autopsy team, and he put his name in his professional accreditation to that. So, I mean, even if he had done the autopsy, it would have produced a similar result.
Yeah.
And people would have had a problem with it.
I agree. The autopsy could have been done better. You know,
it's okay. I'm just moving so the camera has something to look at. The autopsy absolutely could have been done better, but
Bobby Kennedy had a really poor opinion of the autopsy.
Well, I mean, in 1963, the difference between a pathologist and a forensics pathologist was not very well understood.
Can I get your plate out of your way?
Yeah, please. Thanks a lot. No problem.
Thanks, boss. But that isn't to say that any of the people who participated were unqualified in any respect. You know,
No.
Walter Frick, he was an army doctor. But the...
Finch? You mean Finch, right?
Fick? F-I-C-K, I think it is. Fink?
I thought it was Finch.
Maybe it's pronounced
Pure
that way.
Finch?
No. Walter. Oh, was it Pierre?
Okay, because there were three, right?
There was Humes, Boswell, and Frick. Or Finch. Finch? Okay.
Yeah.
So
Finch.
he was
an army man.
Yeah, he was an army doctor, but the Navy pathologist requested that he participate in this autopsy because he was well noted for his work in the field of wound ballistics.
Right.
You know? And this idea that, Commander Humes had never performed an autopsy from gunfire wounds, that's not true. In the fall of 1963, Commander Humes was rotating back to the United States. He had recently completed a tour of duty aboard the USS Saratoga, which was a hospital ship operating in the South China Sea. And during that tour of duty, he performed numerous autopsies on American service personnel who had been killed in combat in Vietnam.
Yeah.
So it's like, what do you guys are just making stuff up now, you know?
Well, I mean, I think most of them are saying is that they were pressured to do a fake autopsy, so their expertise really doesn't come into it.
But the thing is, you can't fake it. How did you fake the x-rays? How did you fake the autopsy photographs?
Would you like a refill on your drink?
Yes, please.
And that brings up another point. Now, Finch, apparently, the conspiracy theorists, they always come out with the story of the cigar-smoking general there. Was that the autopsy?
Somebody, yeah.
It's supposed to be Curtis LeMay. Now, that is from the witness of Pierre Finch, actually. But Pierre Finch did not say it was Curtis LeMay. He just said it was a cigar-smoking general. He assumed it was, Curtis LeMay because Curtis LeMay smoked cigars, right? Now, here's the thing. Curtis LeMay was a household name by then.
Yeah.
He was a war hero. How would Finch not have known who it was?
In a couple of years from now, Curtis LeMay is going to be on the ticket for president, isn't he? Who did he run with?
Curtis LeMay?
Yeah.
Did he really?
Was it Walker or was it... He was a candidate for vice president at some point, Curtis LeMay. Maybe it was Wallace? I can't remember. But anyways, I digress. That's not really that important. But yeah, Curtis LeMay was a known person at that time, you know?
He was a household name. And you're telling me that Pierre Finch, an army man, did not recognize Curtis LeMay?
Yeah.
Why would he not have named him? Right?
I don't know.
Okay, so maybe there was a cigar smoking general there. So what?
Yeah, I mean, well, also, you know,
Giving
you
orders.
look at the problems between communication with the FBI and the CIA, but various government bureaucracies, they are famous for jealously guarding their bureaucracy.
Yeah.
So the idea that the head of the Air Force is going to show up at a Navy hospital and start throwing his weight around, I'll tell you right now, there's a bunch of admirals there who are not going to care for that at all, you know?
No, plus, you know, common sense tells me that if you had to do a fake autopsy, you wouldn't do it in a crowded room, right, with hundreds of witnesses. I mean, it would be done very secretly, very hush-hush. There were hundreds of witnesses there. If you listen to this guy, Paul O'Connor, the guy who said there was a missing brain, right? That's what he says. He said there was absolute chaos there.
Well, it's just like it goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning, you know? This is exactly why you don't do things like this way. You just bring his plane down over the ocean,
Right.
and there's no body to do an autopsy on to begin with, you know?
Exactly.
That way we don't have to go through the extra hoops of faking an autopsy, you know? And I mean, this is the thing. It's a lot of the times conspiracy theories, they don't follow their own ideas through to their logical conclusion, you know? It's like if you have multiple shooters, then logically you need to have multiple bullets too, right? But where are those things? Now you just have to postulate, well, somebody got there and took them. Well, that's just rank speculation, you know? Like anybody can do that. Anybody can just make stuff up. There's the logical fallacy. It's called ad hoc reasoning.
Right.
Ad hoc is a Latin phrase. It means for this purpose.
For this purpose, yeah.
And that's what they do. They create reasoning on the spot for that purpose. Why did we not find bullets that matched any gun other than Lee Harvey Oswald's? Well, somebody must have taken them. You know, well, how do you know that? Well, it's because they're not there. And it's like you're using the absence of evidence as if it were actual evidence of something,
right.
you know? One of the interesting things I found is that, thank you.
Are you still working on that?
Yeah, I'm just, they're bringing me out another one.
No, I mean that.
Oh, this, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, I'm a slow eater.
Oh, no, okay.
So, one of the things that I find interesting is that people who are conspiracy theorists, oftentimes they have like a laser focus on a handful of things, and within that handful of things, they can be very, very knowledgeable about them.
Right.
But when you extrapolate out of that to talk about the case just like more in a general sense,
Right.
oftentimes they don't really have a good understanding of anything that's not in their specialty area, but also they don't really have a good understanding of like how things over here connect to things over there. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's what I mentioned earlier, looking at things at a macro level. The problem with these people is that they're so busy counting the trees that they forget that they're in a forest.
Yep.
So you got to step back and look at the overall picture. And then you'll realize that just as in any other case, right, there's going to be anomalies. Even if it was a hobo that was murdered, it's going to be one or two things that just, that's not going to make sense. But when you look at the overall picture, that's when you can, arrive at the proper conclusion. Like, I mean, just to digress a little bit, during the 9/11 investigation, they brought up this point that Muhammad Atta's passport was
Found on street level.
on the street level,
Yeah.
right? So they said, oh, how did the black boxes disappear and this guy's passport was there? Well, I'm sorry, things like that do happen.
Yeah.
Maybe his passport was in a briefcase, and it just happened to survive there. So yeah, I mean, those things, they make you stop and think like, hey, how did this happen, right? But then you got to look at the overall picture. And not to digress, but I mean, if you look at the 9/11 conspiracy, you realize that it's just the whole idea of, I mean, if they really wanted to do this in order to provoke a war with Afghanistan, they didn't have to bring down the towers.
Yeah.
All you needed was one plane,
Yep.
crash right in the center of Manhattan.
Yeah.
That would have done it. Why two planes? Why two towers? Right?
It's another thing. There's this great scene in Oliver Stone's JFK where the garrison team is they're discussing Oswald's time in Mexico City, And Kevin Costner as Jim Garrison, he says, I'm beginning to think that the whole point of this Mexico episode was to leave the blame at Fidel Castro's door so that the American public would have supported an invasion of Cuba.
Yeah.
Okay, so why didn't they do that then?
Exactly.
It's like, why did we never get Bay of Pigs version 2.0?
There you go. Exactly.
If we're going to go through all this hassle of assassinating the president,
right,
framing a pro-Castro Marxist for having done that as a pretext to invade Cuba and overthrow the Castro regime, why did we get like 2/3 of the way there and then be like, yeah, we just decided not to invade Cuba? Kind of seems like a lot of wasted effort, don't you think?
No, as a matter of fact, and I mentioned this to Chris during our interview, I said the Warren Commission and the House Select Committee on Assassination, they went out of their way to exonerate Cuba.
Yeah.
And the Soviet Union and the DGI, the Cuban intelligence and the KGB, from any involvement in this assassination. And as a matter of fact, I think there was a congressman who actually went and spoke to Castro about this, right? So if it was a military-industrial complex that wanted to change the status quo, because Kennedy was a dove, he was too soft on communism, and we need to change the status quo, and we need to invade Cuba, overthrow communism, whatever. So why did they go out of their way to exonerate Cuba and the Soviet Union? So that part didn't make sense either to me. And then when I read, the first non-conspiracy book I read was, of course, Gerald Posner's book, like most people. Case closed.
Yeah, me too.
And that really, all the things that have been at the back of my mind, they all came together. He just presented them so concisely. He makes a few mistakes along the way, that's fine. But overall, his thesis is correct.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Bugliosi's book was just, it took me 2 weeks to finish that one.
Oh, God, it took me way longer. And it was fun because I had to carry it around in my backpack with me to read it on the subway and everything, I've read that book twice, and it's really good. Very exhaustive. He pretty much discusses every single claim that has ever been made about anything having to do.
And he did it without a computer too.
I know, that's the craziest. The endnotes come on a separate CD-ROM.
Yeah.
Because if you included the endnotes, the book would seriously be like that thick. It's already like that to begin with.
It took a lot out of him. It took him 20 years to write that book.
Oh yeah, but I'm grateful that he did it. And the title, Reclaiming History, it's very apt. It's very appropriate.
Have you read Diogenes' book, the one Reclaiming Parkland?
No.
Because all these guys claim that they...
Get out of here, man. That guy is starting to make... I'm starting to cross paths with that guy in various Facebook groups. James D. Eugenio, yeah.
I'd like to see you rip him a new one, man. This guy is just such a... Look, to me, anybody who roots for Garrison is beyond the pale.
Well... I think it was you. Wasn't it you that posted that article recently about the guy who was he was kind of like me, he was a big Jim Garrison conspiracy guy because he saw JFK, and then he grew up and he researched it. It was
an article from Quillette.
Yeah.
That was me, yeah.
So I was reading that, and in it, the author made a great point. He's like, okay, let's give Garrison most of the benefits of most of the doubts. Let's say that Bannister, Shaw, Oswald, and Ferry all knew each other. Let's say they partied together. Let's say they had gay sex together. Let's say they got drunk and conspired about assassinating the president together. Even then, the only person actually tied to the crime would still be Lee Harvey Oswald, even if all of those other things were true, which we can't verify, right?
It doesn't exonerate Oswald.
No, part of the thing with Clay Shaw, it's like, where is this conspiracy exactly? In what way did Clay Shaw conspire with anybody to do anything, It's like David Ferry was supposed to fly to New Orleans to pick up Oswald, but Oswald didn't have enough money.
I think it was Houston.
He was on his way to Houston to go to an ice skating rink. Yeah, but but how does David Ferry going to Houston, how does that do anything to help Lee Harvey Oswald in Dallas? Houston is a significant ways away from Dallas, It's not like around the corner.
No. Well, Garrison went by what they call guilt by association, right?
And it's like, why would Clay Shaw call Dean Andrews and want to send him to Dallas to represent Lee Harvey Oswald.
Totally didn't make any sense.
Doesn't Clay Shaw know we're going to kill Oswald in like the next 48 hours? Like, why are you trying to get this guy a lawyer, man?
I brought this point up in our group, and both of our groups, actually. I said, look, if you had to frame this guy as a patsy, if the whole idea was to frame him as a patsy and then get rid of him, why would you call a lawyer to represent him?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Somebody like, who is Dean Andrews anyway?
He's like a low-level ambulance-chasing lawyer that mostly works with gay people in New Orleans to get them off like prostitution charges, solicitation charges, that sort of thing. You know, he's at that level of like, you know, legal counsel. He's not, you know, F. Lee Bailey or something like that. He's not, you know, Johnny Cochran. And it's like, you know, look at the circumstances. Dean Andrews is in the hospital to have an operation. He's on drugs. He calls his secretary. First, he calls her to talk to her about the assassination and how the lawyer that is going to represent Oswald is really going to make a good name for himself. And then a couple hours later, he calls her back to be like, hey, somebody called me wanting me to be Oswald's lawyer. It's totally possible. The guy just made that up while he was high on drugs in the hospital, you know?
And Oswald's face was all over the, it was all over the news by then, right? It was, it was very well known. And plus he had a New Orleans connection, so.
Yeah. I mean, it might have been at that moment where the media revealed his New Orleans connection that it clicked in Dean Andrews' mind. Right. And he was like, oh yeah, okay, I can get a little piece of this. And he did.
No, but I'm telling you, conspiracy theorists, if they have any smarts, they would disassociate themselves from Jim Garrison completely. I mean, Joan Mellon did.
Yeah. Mark Lane in his later years did.
Did, yeah. And even David Lifton thinks he's a kook.
Yeah.
Right? And who's the other guy? Harold Weisberg.
Yeah.
He dissociated because they realized this guy was out. He was on a power trip. You know, he's a publicity whore. Using his DA position to take unfair advantage of this thing just to get some attention.
What Jim Garrison did was profoundly unethical. Like,
yeah, it was wicked, man.
It was
totally wicked.
It really was beyond the pale. And it's like his own staff turned on him, his family turned on him.
Right.
He was censured by the Louisiana State Bar Association. The Supreme Court had to intervene to stop him from prosecuting Clay Shaw. They're like, look, you already took this to court and lost. Stop trying to come up with more charges to charge this guy.
Yeah, so the fact that the Eugenio, he stated publicly, right? He said on one of his forums that